Delighted to be joined today by Calum Johnson, uh, former GB triathlete, national cross country winner in 2020. Um, Calum, first of all, thanks a lot for agreeing to speak to the Sports Gazette. We'd love to chat a little bit about your sort of move into full-time running, your hopes ahead of the cross season. Just for a bit of context, we're speaking on the Friday before you're doing the Liverpool Cross Challenge tomorrow. So probably by the time we go out, you'll have either heard the good or bad. Well, you'll have ran the good or bad news right yourself. But yeah, how are you feeling ahead of Liverpool Cross?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. Always enjoy, chatting running, chatting sport in general. So that's grateful for that. But yeah, I'm feeling all right. I feel pretty good. Better than I thought I would be, given what I was thinking sort of 6 to 8 weeks ago. I thought maybe Liverpool might come too soon and I might not do it. But I've had a couple of good sort of races in the build up, and I thought, yeah, I'm definitely in better shape than I anticipated. So no, I'm looking forward to it. I think Liverpool's always a stacked field. I haven't done the race in 8 years since I was a junior. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to just getting stuck in and just seeing what happens. Really, just being back at Liverpool. Like I said, haven't been at Sefton Park for so long. So yeah, it'll be nice to be back.
Well, I was running in Bushy Park yesterday, and there was no one there, and I'm pretty sure it's because all the quick guys are running in Liverpool. So it's all going to be pretty exciting on tomorrow. But yeah, and I suppose you've got a bit of a double chance because I think if this was run like no COVID, this would have probably been a Eurocross and a World Trials probably. Uh,
Yeah.
um, but I suppose you've kind of got it might be good or bad, but if it doesn't go well tomorrow, then you've always got next year as well for the World Cross Trials as well. So either it'd be really good in that you qualify for both, or but
Yeah, yeah.
it's probably
Since that's the ideal situation. But yeah, I mean, that's one thing I've learned over the years, not to be too fixated on trying to qualify for one thing, because there's always other opportunities. For me, like qualifying, getting GB vests, getting to major championships is just it's just a nice bonus, really. So yeah, whatever happens tomorrow happens, and if I qualify, that would be yeah, I'd be ecstatic. But yeah, plenty
well,
other things coming up.
you seem to be in pretty good form. I know that you ran a 28-26 10K on the road, and then you obviously ran pretty well at national relays. There weren't many, if any, that ran quicker. So you're obviously in decent form. So yeah, best of luck for that tomorrow. But sort of winding back quite a long way. I mean, I've kind of done a bit of digging on your whole sort of running history, and I suppose that kind of starts with Power 10, which is obviously a bit limited. But
Yeah.
what I've gathered, you were you were a decent junior, but you're a better senior than you were a junior.
Yeah.
Um, and you, the kind of your uptick kind of coincided. Am I right in thinking the time that you started doing duathlon? Um,
Yeah, pretty much. So just to sort of put a basic sort of outline on things, and sort of how it all started was that I come from a swimming background. That was my main sport from the age of 9. And I swam competitively for about 6 years, sort of regional, national level. Not to a standard that I was at triathlon or I'm running. And it was just through schools cross country races that I actually started to get into a bit more cross country running. And yeah, I mean, first English schools back in 2009 was 211th. And I remember my dad saying the week before, there's a big race next week. And to me, I was just a swimmer at the time. I wasn't doing any running at all. I had no idea of the context of English schools, or what it was or anything like that. And he's like, you could try a couple of runs this week when you get home from swimming. And I was just about like, nah, I don't like running. I just do it because I'm good. I get a free night away next week down in Loughborough, and I get to go a day off school, etc., etc. So I was a bit like, yeah, I didn't realize sort of how big the event was, and I got there and I was a bit like overwhelmed by the whole thing. I remember like hearing stories of people getting spiked and thinking, people getting spiked, like people end up in the back of an ambulance after being spiked, and I don't want to do this. I was like nearly ready to go home. But anyway, I got round and I was tuned in 11th, and it was after then that I started to get into more cross-country running, and it wasn't long after that I joined the group at Gateshead Harriers. And once I joined there, and I was still swimming at the time, I think it was a guy at swimming who said, look, like if you're doing a bit of running and you can swim really well, like why not try a triathlon? And that's how I got into triathlon, really. And I was scouted about a year later by British Triathlon to join their British Olympic talent pathway program. And that's sort of how it went. And I was still at home at the time, and then a couple of years later I went off to university and what have you. But yeah, that's sort of how I got into running, really. So I didn't really do a lot of running as a junior, and it was triathlon. Well, it was more like triathlon that got me into running. So yeah, I've only yeah, I guess that's in a nutshell. That's sort of how it went.
Yeah, and well, by the looks of things, you went into triathlon and you did have quite a lot of decent success. I mean, you won a European triathlon, like European Cup in first.
Yeah.
You had some pretty good placings in World Triathlon Cups.
Yeah.
Top 10 in 2018, was it?
Yeah.
2019. So I mean, yeah, you had a lot of success in the triathlon, and then you kind of seems like you decided more recently that you wanted to come back to running or go to running if you did less than you were younger. But what sort of motivated you to make that decision?
I mean, several factors really. First of all, it was a really hard decision because I absolutely love triathlon, and I love the community, the triathlon community. I love the training, and I just love being out on my bike, and I love, I do like swimming as well. That's what I grew up doing. But to start off, maybe I think, I've always, in the back of my mind since starting triathlon, I've always loved cross country, and I've always loved running a little bit more than I've loved the other two sports. And if I was going to tend to do any racing aside from triathlon, it would always be running. So there was always that sort of temptation in the back of my mind, like maybe one day I'll go to running and I'll just focus on running. Because it was something I wanted to do. It was just a matter of when I would do it, and when was the right time to do it. And I think, what sort of happened with me is that I was in Leeds at university. I was part of British Triathlon sort of not world class program. I was never on the world class program or funded, but part of their centre of excellence in Leeds. And I was sort of happy training there, and everything was, everything was going pretty well. There's always bad things go happen, and things go wrong as well. But once I actually finished university, I didn't really have a place in the centre because I wasn't on the world class program. So I was more or less, I wouldn't say pushed out, but I wasn't really made to feel very welcome. And that led to me to sort of think about relocating and where else could I go. And I moved down south, down to Eastbourne for a year, and joined the triathlon squad down there. It was less of a performance centre than Leeds was. It was very different environment completely. And eventually it just got to a point where I was really, really struggling financially. Triathlon's an incredibly expensive sport, because none of the racing and the traveling is funded. And because I wasn't on the world class program, I wasn't receiving any funding. I wasn't receiving any medical, physio, or anything. So all of that was like coming out of my own pocket. And, you sort of add that to living away from home and renting. Eventually it got to a point where I just completely drained all my finances and had to move back to Newcastle and move back in with my family. And it was only then really I started to think, well, is triathlon even possible? Like, because the prize money just wasn't there at the time. And I think without the funding, like it was proven impossible, really. So that was a major factor. Um, and yeah, I also think COVID had a big sort of impact on it as well. Because being in Newcastle, what I'm not part of there's no triathlon program up here. So getting pool access for swimming sessions, getting track access, etc. during COVID was impossible. It was ridiculously hard, and that sort of led me to think, well, I haven't swam in so long. Like, is now the time? Maybe can I get back for one to the level I was at, or is now the time to focus a little bit more on running, and that's sort of how it went, really. So it was in the back of my mind for a long time, but I didn't officially make the decision and sort of accept it until about May time this year.
It's really interesting because I think a lot of like cross country runners or athletes, their perception of triathlon is that, well, that's where the money is. Like, obviously, that sounds like that couldn't be further from the truth. If you're not on that world class program, in some ways, it might serve a bit of a benefit to you. Do you think? 'Cause, I mean, you seem to have transitioned to just your running really well over the last few months, and I'm just wondering, are you still doing like some of your old triathlon training, like your cross training to help you running? Or
Yeah, so I mean, obviously less so. I mean, when I was full-time triathlon, it was 3, 4 times a day every day. It was, swim bike run non-stop. But now less so. I think balancing that with part-time work, and yeah, just like, with cycling, for example, during the winter, you're limited with daylight. And I think, like, on top of that, I think just focusing a bit more on running, like, there is less focus on the swimming bike, but I do enjoy swimming and cycling, and I want it to remain part of my program. One, from a sort of injury prevention point of view, and also just because, like I said, I enjoy doing it, and for me, like, getting in the pool, is what makes me happy once in a while, and getting out on my bike when it's a nice sunny day, is one of the things I love doing. And it's not that I'll switch a run for a swim or a cycle. If I've got the time, then I'll just do that on top. And my body's so conditioned, like, to be dealing with high volumes of training. It's not too much of a problem. And on a sort of full-time running program, to be adding swimming and cycling to it.
yeah, have you increased your mileage now that you're focusing more on the running, or is it just that not really
Yeah,
changed?
yeah, no, it has increased. Yeah, I think, yeah, just like, I mean, I've got sort of long-term plans to run a marathon next year. So I think it was sort of inevitable that I had to do a bit more running mileage just to get my body and my legs used to that sort of time on feet. Because you can do as much cycling and swimming as possible, and it's great for the sort of aerobic system and the engine. But I imagine when it comes to the last 6 to 10 miles of a marathon, your legs are probably wondering where all the miles are, where all the pounding the pavement's been. So
Yeah, so that's the next step. Is the marathon, you reckon? Are we looking at sort of October London Marathon next year, or is that
um,
a goal open?
earlier actually, plans to do one in April, in Manchester. That's acting as sort of Commonwealth trial, possibly Europeans trial and Worlds trial as well. So at the moment, that's the plan, is to run Manchester in early April. But that might change depending on selection policies and all of that. But yeah, that is the plan, to run a marathon in April, which, yeah, it's quite scary. It's only what it's only like 4 or 5 months away, so it's not long. So we're
Yeah,
just slowly building up. Don't want to rush into too much mileage too soon.
Yeah, well, I suppose the cross is a good place to start, isn't it? In terms of that, you're naturally doing a bit of high volume anyway. So when you were involved in the British triathlon setup or it's representing GB,
Yeah.
did you ever get much advice on how to like viably make a full-time career out of it if you're kind of outside that world-class program?
This is going to sound really harsh to British triathlon, but I mean, absolutely not. I mean, when I was at uni, I was really fortunate to be part of a program called TAS. I'm not sure if you're aware of it. I mean, there'll be lots of athletes on it who aren't on, world-class programs or national governing body funding. And TAS sort of is a program to fund sort of dual career athletes who are at university, at school, possibly in the army or the navy or any of the forces. And that sort of provides you with sort of physio, nutritional support, medical support, lifestyle coaching. And that was a big part of sort of me as an athlete during the 4 years I was at university. And it was massively helpful. Like without it, I don't think I could have continued because my body would have just broken down. Like, the injuries that came with triathlon or the bike crashes, etc. Like, without that medical and physio support and that S&C support, I just don't think it would have been possible. And obviously you are put forward for tasks from British Triathlon. So I suppose it is British Triathlon having some interest in you. But they sort of like palm you off onto TAS and sort of they're like, okay, well, we can forget about that athlete because TAS is looking after them and they're not our responsibility because they're not on the world class performance program. So it's very much just up to you to sort of pave out your own sort of pathway really in career and in terms of what races to do. You're not getting, I never received any advice from any coaches at British Triathlon to say, well, there's a world championship coming up. This is you'd be best doing this race, and this race. That was very much like up to me, and it was up to me to go and look at the selection policy and make a decision on which races would be best for me to go to in order to qualify for that world championship at the end of the year or that European championship in the middle of the season. So yeah, it wasn't really like, British Triathlon had very, very little involvement in sort of my career as a triathlete. It was very much the support I got was through the university and through that TAS program.
It's interesting you say that because people I've spoken to involved in British athletics as well, they kind of say the exact same thing. It's interesting that you see you do see people making career in triathlon and professional running built around a brand, essentially built around, and admittedly it's a lot of, you're seeing a lot of professional influencers essentially making a viable career out of running.
Yeah.
And that's because it seems like they do have a profile for it and it kind of works. But if you're a full-time athlete like yourself, especially with triathlon, where I can imagine you just there aren't any minutes in the day for you to do anything.
No.
But you never really have received any advice in terms of how you should be marketing yourselves or branding yourselves or ways of trying to generate income as an athlete.
Absolutely not. And and I was at the really, really difficult thing for me when I was in Leeds. Leeds was a big performance center in triathlon. It was full of funded athletes. It was full of athletes on the world class program, and they happened to be some of my best mates when I was in Leeds, and still best mates now. And I was training a lot with them. I was actually part of Georgia Taylor Brown, non-Stanford, Vicky Holland's training group when I was in Leeds, when they were preparing for the games in Rio and the Commonwealth Games as well. And what was hard for me is that I was seeing on a daily basis, what they were getting and the support they were getting and the access they were getting to resources. and I'm sort of going along as like on the same sort of ride, but with absolutely nothing from like in terms of support or or any of that access. And that was really hard, and at times was quite sort of detrimental to sort of my mental health, um, because I was just seeing what everybody else was getting and thinking, well, I'm going to the same world championship in 2 months' time. Like, why is nobody caring about me? Like, or I'm going to this World Cup exactly the same as this athlete, but this athlete's getting access to a heat chamber or an environmental chamber, and I'm not. And it's like, well, how does that work? And that's like just because they're on the program, they're sort of cared about, which was really really difficult at times, and it made me want to leave Leeds several times, and I think to an extent as well was detrimental to my performance because I just wasn't turning up to races as confident as I could have been, and that's what's changed now. When I'm now in the environment I'm in now, I don't have that sort of, well, why aren't I getting that? Or what if I was getting that? What could I be? It's very much like, I've got what I need here, and, I make the best of that situation. So
It sounds a very sort of difficult experience, but
I feel like I'm just moaning about British triathlon here. Like, that's not what it's about, but it is an insight into, an unfunded, sort of unsupported athlete, really, who's
yeah,
racing at that level.
it seems like a bit of a performance at all costs sort of mentality where you're not in it, then you're out of it. But yeah, it's my opinion is that if you generally have more professional, if the sport is more professional and people are being encouraged to market themselves, and there are generally more professional athletes outside this small little system, and the standard's going to be higher. There's a reason why in the 80s with all our top runners, why there was such a depth, and it was because you had like high, decent prize money. You had all these races being put on and shown on telly. So yeah, it is a real shame, but I think a bit of that's a lack of, they don't have the funding, do it, and they don't have the real expertise at all within either British triathlon or within British athletics to kind of focus on that marketing or that professional side of it. But it sounds a pretty horrible experience for yourself. But
I think like, I think you are right in what you're saying. Like, it is, at the end of the day, there's only so much money, there's only so much funding there, and you have to fund athletes, and it's inevitable that some athletes are going to miss out. But I just think, when you're part of when you are representing your country and you're going to a world championship, you're going to a European championship, then that governing body really, in my eyes, has a duty of care, regardless of if being on any program. And I think like, if you're not receiving some level of support, there may not be money into your bank account or whatever, but it might just be a sort of, regular meetings and regular, just catch-ups to discuss progress, to discuss your sort of pathway as an athlete, what's next, and what do you need, what are you desperate for, maybe we can make that work, things like that. But I guess it's a win at all costs sort of mentality, and it's about Olympic medals at the end of the day. And I think what my problem, well, not my problem, but like what it was for me was that I wasn't seen as Olympic medal winning potential, and therefore that was it really. It was like, well, you don't really matter to us that much. And and I think for the guys who the likes of Alex Yee, Georgia Taylor Brown, as using them as examples, triathlon's a really, it's a really good life. Like, I think now there's a lot more prize money in than there was a few years ago. So I think you can make a really good living out of triathlon, and it looks like a pretty sweet lifestyle. But don't get me wrong, like, I know those two athletes, I know Alex really well, I know Georgia really well. I've trained with them and competed with them over the years, and they work incredibly hard, and they deserve everything they get. But yeah, it's a much nicer experience, I think, when you are getting the support that you need.
Yeah. Do you think that it potentially alienates people that are that next level who are hoping to make the jump that just can't afford it? Is there a big benefit to having like greater personal financial backing in
I think
triathlon?
so. Yeah. And I think that's why the sort of dropout between sort of junior and senior level in triathlon is quite big. Because like, if you don't necessarily get onto to funding as a junior or a young under 23, and you also aren't necessarily part of a university program, then that you sort of have no option really, but to sort of take a back seat. And I also think like that's one thing, my biggest criticism of the governing body over the last sort of 5 6 years is that there was no funding of development. It was very much, we've got what we want at the top, we're getting the Olympic medals, well, that's sort of it. Like, why do we need to do anything else? And it's like, well, hang on a minute. You've got several athletes coming through, not quite good enough, maybe not Olympic medal winning standard, but potentially. But you've got all your eggs in that basket at the top. And eventually that basket's just going to disappear, because that's how sport works. Like, athletes eventually retire, athletes eventually start to slow down and not perform as well. So I think like, yeah, I think with triathlon especially, um, if there is a lack of funding earlier on in career, then the dropout rate is huge, because it is an expensive sport. It's quite hard to access. It's not like other sports. There's a lot of equipment, needed. There's a lot of traveling required for racing. Like, there is no British racing scene at all in triathlon, like none. Every race, I did as an elite athlete was in Europe or was somewhere around the world, at my own expense. And if I couldn't afford to go, then that's sort of game over. That's like it. Like, I don't have access to racing, and I won't be able to qualify for championships, and I won't be able to put a case forward for getting on the world class program, because I don't have any results to back me up. So yeah.
It sounds a bit self-perpetuating, a bit of a cycle, really. Of it becomes harder because you're outside that system, and then it'll just become even harder.
Oh yeah. It's a downward spiral, really. And I think if you're not fully committed, or you're not self-determined, and if you don't have a slight financial backing from family, friends, potential like local sponsors, which for me was a big part of my sort of career, then it's incredibly difficult. It's nigh on impossible.
It's sad. Have you ever had it? Do you have any sponsors now for your running?
I don't know. I mean, I get a little bit of help from Sports Shoes, as an ambassador. Um, I'm not on a paid contract or anything like that, but it's just a very much a quite flexible ambassador sort of role, with a bit of support in terms of kit here and there. But that's it really. I don't have any. I had more sponsorship and support when I was a triathlete, but I think that's because I was screaming out for like financial help, because otherwise, if I didn't have it, then I wouldn't be able to get to the races. Whereas it's a bit easier in running. Like, the races tend to be a drive away, or yeah, not too bad. So,
But do you ever? I mean, there are races in the UK with decent prize money. Have you ever? I think I probably know the answer to this, because it's always the same. Have you ever gone to a race, because there's decent prize money
there? In Britain,
in running?
in running, um, not really. No, I can't think of it. I mean, I don't know many races that have decent prize money anyway. But yeah, I tend to did it. I did it a lot more in triathlon. I would tend pick and choose races where I could potentially earn a bit of money, or whichever races were cheapest to get to, which tended to be Eastern Europe. Um, so, but running wise, no, I've never really picked and choose races dependent on prize money. I guess I'm pretty new to the running scene as well. So like this year, 2021 has very much been a sort of introductory year, and it's been like, I've raced on the track for the first time in like 9 years or something like that. I've done my first half marathon this year, and I've done three, and it's very much been a big learning experience and finding my feet sort of. Yeah, to be honest. So things might change, but
it's kind of quite refreshing for you, I imagine, coming straight to the athletics side of thing, where naturally there isn't a great deal of money in athletics anyway. So you've kind of at least got a bit of a level playing field, haven't you?
Going back to that, that question, it has been quite refreshing. It sort of felt like a weight off my shoulders, and I feel like that's, there's several reasons why I'm performing a little bit better, than I was, and I think one of the reasons is that, I'm not carrying that strain and carrying that stress of like, can I afford to go to the next race? Like, what place do I have to come in that race, break even, or make a profit, or where do I have to come to be able to afford to go to the next race? And I think when you go into like, race after race in a whole season with that sort of in your mind, or that doubt in your mind of like, well, if I don't perform here, I'm not going to be able to go to the next race. Like, it can work in both ways, really. It can work as a positive, but I think for me, it had more of a negative impact. So, going to running races now, like, turning up to Liverpool tomorrow and just being like, well, yeah, it's not like I haven't got like, it's not like I'm not bothered, but like, whatever happens, shouldn't have a massive impact financially on me. And, yeah, if I get a bad result, then it's not like I can't afford to go to the next race. So I'm not carrying that sort of, mental stress that I was, when I was doing triathlon.
If there was more money in athletics, how much would it change for you, do you think? As in, because it sounds like at the moment you're able to do, I know you're working part-time, but it sounds like you're able to train generally, do you reckon, as hard as you can? Or do you think there's kind of a ceiling?
Yeah, I don't feel like working at the moment, like what I do job wise, is having any negative impact on the volume of training I can do. If there was more money in athletics, in racing, and also in support, in terms of support, like, I probably would go back to a full-time athlete sort of life, and I probably wouldn't work because, I had a taste of that in triathlon. And I know for a fact, like, there's nothing better, than, finishing a run or whatever, and just going to bed for recovery, or getting as much more sleep, or your days are revolved and focused around running, and I think just having that bit extra recovery time, like, yeah, would definitely, if the money was there and I was able to live that lifestyle and train full time and not have to work, then I would, I'd grasp it with both hands, 100%.
So it would be an advantage. It's more of a level playing field in athletics than it is in triathlon, so it doesn't bother you as much, basically.
Yeah, 100%. Like, you like, there's no way you can't compete at the top level of triathlon unless you're a full-time athlete, because simply you haven't got the time unless you are full-time. I think with running is more of a, like you said, is more of a level playing field, because like working part-time doesn't necessarily have a strain on the training and how hard I work. I'm still able to do that. Yeah, of course, it would be nice to have a bit more recovery time and a bit more time to sort of just sit on the sofa or go to bed. But like, yeah, that's not, it's not the way it is, and it doesn't bother me that much, to be honest.
It sounds like it's a good transition to running. But I've got one last question. I've kind of asked it to quite a few people who'd be in contention for it. But I know that obviously you've got bigger targets. You've got the Liverpool Cross. Hopefully, touch wood, you got Eurocross if you get there in December. then
Yeah.
maybe we'll cross next Jan. But how important? I suppose you told us you're doing a marathon as well, so maybe it doesn't even fit. But would you be quite keen to defend your English cross country title?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Like I'm definitely going back. Like providing everything's good and everything's gone to plan. Like it's in the diary. Um, yeah, it's just one of those races. Like I don't do it because I'm not gonna do it because I'm like, well, I have to defend the title. I'm doing it because I love it. Like I love the National Cross. And the National Cross was the next event I went to after going to English schools, cross country wise. And I loved the atmosphere, just everything about it. Like grew up watching that race and sort of always found it inspiring. So like winning it well, was it last year? Yeah, it was still last year. Winning it last year was obviously meant, so much to me. And I guess everyone's seen that in the photos. Like it was genuine. Like I was actually really emotional. So I think yeah, like going back, like there's no doubt I'll go back in February next in 2022. Like I'll be there, and I won't be there just because I feel like I have to defend the title. I'm gonna be there because I want to be there, and like it's like one of the most important, not most important, but one of my favorite races to do. So yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, pretty special to win that title last year then.
Oh yeah, it was like I didn't really think. I know you never think you're gonna win. You never really, yeah, you never really think about winning. You always have in the back of your mind, well, what if I did win, sort of thing, or what if I did get on the podium. So I think like, yeah, obviously when it happened, it was just like, whoa, it's actually happened. Like this is crazy. Like I was watching this race, you know, 8, 9 years ago as a kid and being like, it'd be so cool to just be part of that race, not actually win it. And when I look at the trophy and I see all the names on, I'm like, it's crazy, like the company that you're in, like from winning that race. So yeah.
Well, it's a phenomenal achievement, and yeah, we've
Yeah.
got you've obviously got Parliament Hill this year. So will you be hoping for 2 weeks of rain beforehand and similar conditions?
Well, the rain wouldn't go amiss, definitely. I do like the mud. I prefer to run it on a completely dry course. And I think by February, it's probably likely to be muddy in places. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I've only raced at Parliament Hill once. I think it was my second senior national, and I might have just been outside the top 10. So it'd be nice to go back and hopefully be in contention to win again. And yeah, just it's a pretty iconic course, and I think it's a good course for me. It's hilly. It can be muddy if there's been a lot of rain. So yeah, who knows? But it's definitely in the calendar, and it's in my diary. So if all goes to plan.
Yeah, nice one. I mean that course is never dry, so
Oh
it's gonna
well. Oh,
it's
that's good news to me then.
yeah, it's gonna be an exciting one, and yeah, I think it's just a massive shame that it's not shown anywhere on TV or anything. But people want to know about the characters at the front. They want to see those battles. They want to. There's a lot of interest. You look at one of these like Mark Hookway streams or like a fast running stream on a little mobile phone, which is like really pixelated.
Yeah, yeah,
Like 2,000 people watching. Like I watch
yeah,
a
yeah,
lot. I do a lot. I'm like a boxing correspondent for something else, and
yeah,
they had a big boxing fight, one of the biggest fights. They're all professional. They're all getting paid decent money. They had 1,000 people watching.
yeah.
Mark Cook's got more watching on a little stream. Yeah,
It's crazy, isn't it? Like there is a big following, and there would be nothing bad about sticking that race on the BBC Red button, if they could get the sort of the TV rights and stuff. But I feel like who doesn't want to see the thousands of runners, sprinting up Parliament Hill with London in the background, and maybe with the top 40 athletes with their names on the front of their vests. Like that's what people want to see. Like, I've got so many people in the area, like from where I'm from, and that's at the club, at Gateshead. but just friends as well who aren't necessarily runners but follow the sport. Are always asking, even Liverpool tomorrow, is it on TV? Is this race, can I watch this race somewhere? And I'm always turned around, I'm always disappointing them with, no, it's not. And I'm like, I really wish it was. And, so I do agree. I feel like the audience is there. Like you said, like the fact that, over 2,000 people can be watching Mark's streams on YouTube, and his little videos of sometimes where he even misses runners, but that's because he's doing it off his own sort of his own back, and also trying to play the role of coach and supporter and probably bag carrier as well. So
I reckon someone's going to do it at some point. It's about catching up, to be honest. I think it will happen. But anyway, you've got a big day ahead. Obviously, you're driving down to the pub now.
I am, well, this afternoon, yeah, I've got a few things to do beforehand. But I just want to avoid the early drive in the morning, especially I think there's forecasted snow tomorrow in Newcastle or in the northeast. So probably better to escape before it comes. Otherwise, we might not get down there tomorrow morning if we leave it that late. So yeah.
Well, I would say we'll be watching. We won't be watching because we can't. But yeah, it'll be good. Best of luck tomorrow, and yeah, I'm sure you're fit. It'll be an exciting race, and yeah, good luck. Hopefully, make that first Euro cross team. That'll be good. But yeah, thanks a lot, Calum, and best of luck tomorrow. And then, yeah, hopefully we'll watch on the TV on 12th of December in the Euro cross.
Yeah, that'll be good. That'll be a bonus. But yeah, cheers, George. Thanks for chatting.